Despite it being known as the transportation hub of the South, the city of Atlanta has never had a level of public transit as other major cities like Chicago or New York. This unfortunate irony is a direct result of years of racist policies and racial fears. The current rail and bus system, the Metropolitan Atlanta Rapid Transit Authority, or MARTA, was officially founded in 1975. It was to provide fast, easy, cheap, and reliable transport throughout the city. However, all it has provided is a bleak scar on the city of Atlanta, one which reminds us all of the mistakes and racially driven history of the urban hotspot. In order to see where it all went wrong, we need to go all the way back to 1949. Before the introduction of MARTA in 1965, the predominant form of public transport was a privately owned trolley company. In fact, from 1949 to 1952, Atlanta had the most max-sized trolley buses in the entire country. An overwhelming majority of public transit riders chose to use these buses. At around 80% of all ridership went towards them. These trolleys were rather effective, but the owner of these buses, Georgia Power, had been losing money since 1920, and in combination with the infamous Atlanta public transit strike of 1950, they were looking to get out of the transportation business. Thankfully for them, they got their wish. In 1950, four wealthy businessmen formed the Atlanta Transit Company and proceeded to buy out all of Georgia Power's assets in the public transit business. This was a huge mistake for them, as by 1959, the main American manufacturer of trolley buses, Marmon Harrington, ceased production of the vehicle. Unable to replace their fleet of over 270 buses, the Atlanta Transit Company phased out their entire trolley bus system in 1962. With only a few diesel buses left in commission, prices soared, and suddenly Atlanta had a transit problem. The Georgia General Assembly had a goal, and that was to connect the five major counties: Clayton, Cobb, DeKalb, Fulton, and Gwinnett, with both rail transport as well as bus lines. Fulton County makes up 90% of Metro Atlanta, and Cobb makes up most of the populated suburbs on the outskirts. The racial divide between the two counties was vast. Legal segregation was still in full force. In addition to this, there was a mass migration of white citizens from the city to the suburbs due to the civil rights movement and the increasingly black populace. From 1960 to 1980, over 100,000 white people left the city limits, nearly cutting the population in half. According to the 1970 census, 84% of all people living within Cobb County were white, and around 237,000 residents in Fulton were black, the 11th most per county in all of America. In fact, 38% of the vote in Fulton County was the black vote, which was more than enough to swing elections. Atlanta politicians wanted to be recognized as the major metropolitan area in the South, similar to how New York is in the North, and knew that the only way to increase growth and their image was via a massive public transport project. Due to the fact that the overwhelming majority of the black community lived inside the city limits and in combination with low car ownership rates, they were the group that was most affected by this lack of transportation. Politicians also knew that the black vote would swing the election to create MARTA, so they advertised it to them by promising cheaper fares and interconnectivity throughout all of Atlanta, including the suburbs. Leading up to the 1965 vote, MARTA promised a bus fare reduction from 40 cents to 7, which would boom the black economy and allow for more economic and physical mobility. It was the increased mobility that worried the white population in Cobb. They were still stinging from school integration and wanted as little minorities in their community as possible. It was for this reason that Cobb County rejected the proposal, and to this day there is no way to reach the predominantly white suburb using MARTA. Even now, the controversy surrounding the location and construction of the new Braves Stadium, SunTrust Park, in Cobb County has left many black communities in the city unable to go to their games because there's just simply no way to arrive. The first ever Jewish mayor of Atlanta, Sam Massel, had this to say in a recent interview with Bob Harris for the Library of Georgia about the benefits of MARTA for the black community. But we worked hard at getting the referendum passed. And that is not only a brick and mortar improvement, but it's a human improvement of services, of social security, etc. Mobility is like a man's fifth freedom, and without that, you're in prison. The poor in their neighborhoods, they can't get to shopping or to schools or church or parks or anything else. So it was extremely important, in my opinion, that we got it passed, and many hundreds of thousands of people use it daily, So it's a good service, and I hope it gets expanded more and more. Of the 5 counties that MARTA originally wished to connect, only 2 remained, and they were both in the city of Atlanta. Even more taxes were needed to fund the project, and with only the 2 counties backing, an increase in property tax just wouldn't cut it. Massel knew that the only way to be able to pay for MARTA was to create a sales tax imposed onto Fulton and DeKalb, thus creating a subsidy that he wanted to use exclusively for the construction and operation of day-to-day activities. However, he didn't have that kind of jurisdiction. So, in order to get his plan passed, he had to have it voted on by the General Assembly, which contained a coalition of anti-Atlanta lawmakers from other parts of the state, and a solution seemed highly unlikely. But Massel was a determined man, and campaigned for his new tax plan tirelessly. In the same interview with Bob Harris, Massel described the struggle that he had trying to pass the sales tax in the General Committee. We had to get the state legislature to allow us to put on a sales tax, and at the time, no city, no county authority, Board of Education, or anybody else had a sales tax, just the state of Georgia, 3%, and we had to convince them to let an authority have a sales tax. Following the passing of the bill by Georgia politicians, Massel called for a press conference in the state capitol. He came complete with a large flatbed truck carrying a billboard that read, "Thank you, Georgia lawmakers." In one of the most unconventional moves by a politician in recent history, he brought with him a platoon of attractive women in hot pink dresses, each with little keys to the city that they would give to each lawmaker that voted to approve his tax. Massel also invited the lawmakers to Atlanta City Hall for a lunch consisting of Southern classics, fried chicken, peanuts, and Coca-Cola. In a general election, Massel's tax plan was approved by only a few hundred votes. But even passing it was a monumental success, the triumph of 2 communities, African Americans and Jews, working together to create change that should have never been forgotten. But unfortunately, there was one man standing in their way, and his name was Lester Maddox. Maddox was a man that was openly racist, and he continued to support segregation, all the while being the majority leader for the Georgia Senate. Lester Maddox was once quoted saying, "That's part of American greatness, is discrimination. Yes, sir, inequality, I think, breeds freedom and gives a man opportunity." When Massel met with him to talk about his sales tax plan before it was approved by Georgia lawmakers, Maddox made Massel promise that less than 50% of the money collected actually went towards the operating and construction costs of MARTA. The remainder of the funds collected would go towards other projects that Maddox alone supported, which included various redlining bills. Because of this, MARTA is critically underfunded and has had to raise rates over the years just to pay for the operating costs. As of right now, a one-way ticket on MARTA is $2.50, which is one of the most expensive in the country. The triumph of having the opportunity to create an effective transit system that brings all people together from all walks of life will forever be tarnished by the tragedy and failure of MARTA.